The mortars never stopped. That's what I remember most. 77 days of incoming fire. And even now, 20 years later, I can't hear thunder without hitting the deck. My wife gave up trying to understand after the first year. Some things you just can't explain to people who weren't there. I was 19 years old when they sent me to Khe Sanh, Corporal 26th Marine Regiment, thinking I understood what combat meant because I'd been in country for 4 months. I'd seen some action down near Da Nang, a couple of firefights, thought I was getting the hang of this war. Then they airlifted us into that valley in January 1968, and I realized I didn't know a goddamn thing. Khe Sanh Combat Base sat on a plateau in the northwestern corner of South Vietnam, maybe 6 miles from the Laotian border, 14 miles from the DMZ. Strategic location, they told us. We were there to disrupt NVA supply lines, to be bait for a big engagement that General Westmoreland wanted. Turned out we were good bait. The North Vietnamese army surrounded us with somewhere between 20 and 40,000 troops. We never knew the exact number, and decided they were going to overrun the base and turn it into their Dien Bien Phu, their big victory against the French in '54, the one that ended French colonial rule. We had about 6,000 Marines and South Vietnamese Rangers holding that base, 6,000 against an army. The siege started on January 21st, 1968. I remember because it was the day before my 20th birthday, and I spent it in a bunker while the world exploded around us. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before Khe Sanh, I was from a small town in Pennsylvania. Steel mill town, the kind where your old man worked the mills and expected you to do the same. I had other ideas. Joined the Corps right out of high school in '66, partially because I believed in stopping communism, partially because I wanted to prove I was tough enough, and partially because I wanted to get the hell out of Pennsylvania. The Marines made me tougher, all right, just not in any way I'd imagined. We got to Khe Sanh in early January. The base was surrounded by hills. We'd named them Hill 861, Hill 881 South, Hill 881 North, Hill 950, all named for their elevation in meters. We had outposts on some of those hills, poor bastards, even more isolated than we were. The red dirt was everywhere, got into everything. When it wasn't raining, the dust choked you. When it was raining, and it rained constantly, the whole place turned into a red mud swamp. The airstrip was our lifeline. C-130S and C-123S would come screaming in, offload supplies and reinforcements, load up wounded and dead, and get out as fast as possible. Because the NVA had us zeroed in. They had artillery positioned in the hills around us, in Laos, where we couldn't bomb them, and they could drop shells on any part of that base whenever they wanted. January 21st started with fog. Thick morning fog that you couldn't see 10 feet through. We were on the perimeter, reinforcing the trench line, when the first rounds started coming in. Not mortars at first, rockets and artillery. Big stuff. 122-millimeter rockets that screamed as they came down. 152-millimeter artillery shells that made the ground jump. The fog meant we couldn't see where they were coming from. Couldn't call in airstrikes. Couldn't do anything except dive into the nearest hole and pray. I was in a bunker with 5 other guys. Torres, Jackson, Martinez, Kowalski, and Davis. We'd been together since Da Nang. The bunker was reinforced with sandbags, PSP, planking, and logs, built partially underground. It was cramped, smelled like unwashed bodies and fear, but it was home. When the barrage started, we were all in there, and I remember thinking that at least if we died, we'd die together. The shelling went on for hours. We lost count of the rounds. Later, they estimated the NVA dropped over 1,000 shells on the base that first day. One of them hit our main ammunition dump. I wasn't near it when it went, but I felt the explosion. The whole base felt it. 90% of our ammo just gone. Flames shooting hundreds of feet in the air. Secondary explosions for the next 48 hours. We were rationing ammunition after that. Rationing everything. When the barrage finally let up, not stopped, just decreased, we climbed out to assess damage. The base looked like the moon. Craters everywhere, buildings collapsed, equipment destroyed, and bodies. We had guys who'd been caught in the open, torn apart by shrapnel. I saw a kid I'd played cards with the night before, dead in a trench, still holding his rifle. Torres threw up. Jackson just stared. The rest of us started helping with the wounded, because that's all you can do. That night, the NVA hit Hill 861. We could see the tracers in the distance, hear the firefight. Radio chatter was frantic. They were being overrun, needed reinforcements, needed fire support. But we couldn't send reinforcements. The hills were cut off. All we could do was call in artillery and airstrikes when the weather cleared and hope our guys up there could hold. They held, barely. That's when we understood what we were in for. This wasn't going to be a quick fight. The NVA had us surrounded, dug in, and they weren't leaving. They wanted Khe Sanh, and they were willing to pay any price to take it. The shelling never stopped. Never. Even when it wasn't a full barrage, there were harassing rounds. Random mortars dropping in at random times, keeping everyone on edge, making it impossible to relax or sleep or think straight. You'd be eating sea rations, and a round would impact 50 meters away. You'd be taking a piss, and shrapnel would whistle overhead. You'd be trying to write a letter home, and the ground would shake. After a week, we were all running on fumes. Sleep deprivation does things to your mind. You start seeing things that aren't there, hearing voices. Some guys would just stare at nothing for hours. Others would talk non-stop, manic, unable to shut up. A few lost it completely, started crying or screaming or catatonic. The rats came. With all the bodies, all the garbage, all the destruction, the rats multiplied. They were everywhere. Big ones, fearless, crawling over you at night when you tried to sleep. They'd gotten fat eating the dead. We'd kill them when we could, but there were always more. February was the worst. The monsoon rains turned the base into a swamp. You were never dry. Your feet rotted in your boots. Trench foot, immersion foot, fungal infections. Guys would take their boots off, and chunks of skin would come away. The corpsmen did what they could, but we were rationing medical supplies, too. Torres got hit on February 8th. We were moving between bunkers. You had to time it, sprint when there was a lull in the shelling, and a mortar round landed close. I felt the blast wave, felt the heat, hit the ground. When the smoke cleared, Torres was on the ground. Shrapnel had torn through his left leg, nearly severed it. We dragged him to cover, called for a corpsman. Doc Patterson came running, but there wasn't much he could do. Torres bled out in maybe 3 minutes, kept saying he was cold. It was 80 degrees. We buried him in a temporary grave near the airstrip. Couldn't get bodies out fast enough. They were piling up. Jackson started talking to himself after that. Not crazy talk, just conversations with people who weren't there. Sometimes he'd talk to Torres. I'd hear him at night in the bunker. "Yeah, man, I hear you. Weather's shit today, too." It scared me more than the shelling. The NVA tried to take the base in late February. Ground assault, thousands of them, hitting the perimeter at night. We were on the line when they came. You could hear them before you saw them. Whistles, bugles, shouting. Then they were at the wire, cutting through it, running at our positions. We fired everything we had, M16S, M60 machine guns, claymores, grenades. The whole perimeter lit up. Artillery dropped illumination rounds, turned night into day. I was firing on full auto, burning through magazines, and they just kept coming, stepping over their dead, climbing the wire fanatic. Martinez got bayoneted, hand to hand in the trench. An NVA soldier jumped in and Martinez shot him, but another one was right behind. I saw the bayonet go in, saw Martinez's face. I shot the NVA soldier, but Martinez was already gone. The assault broke after maybe 2 hours. Their bodies were piled at the wire in the trenches all around the perimeter. Hundreds of them. We counted later. We'd killed maybe 500 NVA that night. We lost 43 Marines. When dawn came, I looked at my hands, and they were shaking so bad I couldn't light a cigarette. Kowalski had to do it for me. Neither of us said anything. What was there to say? March brought more of the same. Shelling, occasional ground probes, airdrops that sometimes made it through and sometimes got shot down or scattered across NVA territory. We were down to 2 meals a day, then 1. Sea rations were like gold. Water was rationed. You'd go days without washing. The journalists loved Sanh. They called it the biggest story of the war. Camera crews would fly in during lulls, film us looking haggard and shell-shocked, then leave. They'd ask us questions. How are you holding up? What's morale like? Do you think you can hold the base? I remember one reporter asking me if I was afraid. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because fear had stopped meaning anything. You go past fear after a while. You enter this place where you're just waiting. Waiting to die, waiting to survive, waiting for it to end. The word afraid is too small for what you feel. We lost Davis to a sniper on March 12th. He stood up too high in the trench, and a round took the top of his head off. Just like that. 1 second he was there. Next second he wasn't. We'd been together for 6 months. I didn't even cry. Just dragged his body to the collection point and went back to my position. Kowalski and Jackson were all I had left of the original group. We didn't talk about it. Didn't talk about much at all anymore. Just existed next to each other, sharing cigarettes and silence. The B-52 strikes were the only thing keeping us alive. Arc light missions, they called them. B-52s would carpet bomb the hills around us, dropping hundreds of tons of ordnance. You could feel the strikes from miles away, the ground shaking, the horizon flashing. We'd cheer when they came, knowing thousands of NVA were dying under those bombs. But they kept coming. Always more of them. Supply drops were getting desperate. C-130S couldn't land anymore. The airstrip was too cratered, too dangerous. They'd do low-altitude extraction system drops, pallets on parachutes shoved out the back of the plane. Some landed inside the wire. Many didn't. We'd watch supplies drift down into NVA territory and want to cry. Food was the worst. We were down to 1 sea ration meal every other day. Guys were losing weight fast. I'd lost maybe 30 pounds by March. You'd see guys staring at nothing, too tired to move, too hungry to think. But we still manned the lines, still dug trenches, still fought when they came at us. Because what else were we going to do? We couldn't leave. The only way out was the morgue or a medevac, and medevacs weren't flying most days. I don't remember exactly when I broke, not a specific moment, but a gradual dissolution. Maybe it was the night Kowalski lost his mind. He started screaming, not from pain, not from fear, just screaming. Incomprehensible animal sounds. We tried to calm him down, but he kept screaming until the corpsman came and sedated him. They medevaced him out the next day. I never saw him again. After that, it was just me and Jackson was barely there anymore. He'd do his job, man, his position, but his eyes were empty. Sometimes he'd laugh at nothing. Sometimes he'd cry. Mostly he just stared. I started having this recurring dream. I was back home, in Pennsylvania, but I couldn't speak. I'd open my mouth and no sound would come out. My family would talk to me, ask me questions, and I couldn't answer. I'd wake up in the bunker, drenched in sweat, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Those moments were the worst. The confusion, the disorientation, then the crushing weight of reality settling back in. You're still at Sanh. You're still going to die here. The NVA hit us again in early April. Another ground assault, smaller than February, but just as vicious. By then we were so worn down that fighting felt like moving through mud. Everything in slow motion. I remember firing my rifle and thinking I should feel something, adrenaline, fear, anything, but there was just numbness. Jackson got hit. Not killed, but wounded badly enough for a medevac. Shrapnel in his chest and arm. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, he looked at me and smiled. First real expression I'd seen from him in weeks. "I'm going home," he said. "I'm finally going home." I envied him. I wanted to be wounded, not killed, just hurt enough to leave. That's what we'd become, men who wanted to be wounded just to escape. After Jackson left, I was alone. New guys cycled in, replacements for the dead and wounded, but I didn't learn their names. Didn't want to. What was the point? They'd be dead soon anyway. The siege officially ended on April 8th, 1968. The 1st Cavalry Division broke through and relieved us. 77 days of hell, and it was over. They evacuated us, flew us to the rear, gave us hot food and clean clothes, and told us we were heroes. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a ghost. Of my original group, Torres, Jackson, Martinez, Kowalski, Davis, and me, I was the only one who walked away physically intact. Torres and Martinez and Davis were dead. Kowalski had a psychiatric discharge. Jackson recovered from his wounds, but I heard later he ate his gun in 1972. Couldn't live with what he'd seen, what he'd become. I finished my tour and came home in August 1968. Landed in California, got spit on by protesters at the airport. Someone called me a baby killer. I didn't react, just walked past them, carrying my duffel bag, feeling nothing. My family threw a welcome home party. Neighbors came by, people congratulated me, asked about the war. I couldn't talk about it. Literally couldn't. The words wouldn't come. I'd open my mouth and nothing. Just like in the dream. I started drinking within a month. Started with beer, moved to whiskey. Anything to make the memories blur, to make sleep possible without the nightmares. I'd wake up screaming about incoming mortars. I'd hit the ground when a car backfired. I'd see things in my peripheral vision, rats, bodies, muzzle flashes that weren't there. The VA tried. They really did. Put me in group therapy with other Vietnam vets. We'd sit in a circle and nobody would talk. Just sit there, smoking cigarettes, staring at the floor. What could we say? How do you explain Khe Sanh to someone who wasn't there? How do you make them understand that you died in that valley, even if your body walked away? I went through jobs like water. Couldn't hold one down. Couldn't focus. Couldn't deal with civilian bullshit. My boss would complain about quarterly reports and I'd want to scream. None of it mattered. None of it was real. The only real thing was Khe Sanh, and Khe Sanh never ended. I was still there, still in that bunker, still waiting for the next mortar round. I got married in 1973. Sweet girl, thought she could fix me. Lasted 18 months before she left. Said I wasn't the man she married. She was right. The man she married didn't exist. He died at Khe Sanh with Torres and Martinez and Davis. The anger came later. Anger at the generals who put us there, at the politicians who kept us there, at the American public who forgot us. Khe Sanh was supposed to be this big strategic victory. We held the base, killed thousands of NVA, proved American resolve. Then 2 months after the siege ended, they abandoned the base, just left it, blew up what we couldn't carry and walked away. So what the fuck was it for? Why did Torres die? Why did Martinez die? Why did any of us spend 77 days in that hell if they were just going to abandon it anyway? Nobody has a good answer. They'll talk about strategic flexibility, about changing battlefield conditions, about the bigger picture. But I was there. I know what we paid. And I know it meant nothing. I see the other Sanh survivors sometimes. There's a veterans organization, reunions, that sort of thing. We get together and drink and don't talk about it. We all know, we all remember. What's there to say? The nightmares never stopped. I'm 40 years old now, sitting here in 1988, and last night I dreamed about mortars. I dream about them most nights. Sometimes I dream about the rats, sometimes about the bodies, always about Sanh. I haven't held a steady job in 5 years. Living on disability, seeing a psychiatrist twice a month, taking pills that don't really help. The VA says I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Nice clinical term for being broken. People ask me sometimes if it was worth it, the war, the sacrifice, the cost. I don't know how to answer that. I know that 58,000 Americans died in Vietnam. I know that millions of Vietnamese died. I know that we lost. I know that everything we were told about stopping communism, about protecting freedom, about fighting for democracy, turned out to be either lies or delusions. But mostly I know that 6 guys went into Sanh combat base in January 1968 and only 1 walked out. The other 5 are still there. And the one who walked out isn't really here either. He's still in that valley, still in that bunker, still 19 years old and scared and waiting for incoming. They closed Sanh after we left. The jungle swallowed it. I've seen recent photos. You can barely tell there was a base there. Nature reclaimed it. But I can still see it clear as day. Every trench, every bunker, every crater. It's more real to me than the room I'm sitting in right now. The Marine Corps says we won at Sanh. Maybe by some metric we did. We held the base. We survived the siege. We killed more of them than they killed of us. But I think about Torres bleeding out in my arms. I think about Martinez with that bayonet in his chest. I think about Davis with the top of his head gone. I think about Kowalski screaming and Jackson's empty eyes and all the others whose names I can't remember because I was too numb to learn them. And I don't feel like we won anything. The siege ended 20 years ago. But for me, it never ended. I'm still there. I'll always be there. Some of us made it out of Sanh, but none of us came home.